kicking off the year with Book 5, I believe expectations for refines were a lot greater than last year, considering that power creep only continues to get worse and worse. I myself was definitely under that impression, given that more and more modern units are getting more and more effects that either completely power creep older units, or some way somehow do not allow them to perform nearly as well as older units. I'm looking at Bertram. One thing that most people definitely look forward to at the beginning of each month is the inevitable 4-star refund, whether that's a Grail unit or a 4-star or 3-star demo. I think that's definitely one of the few things people look forward to, as those are easy merge projects for people. So when a unit in that category does end up getting a good refine, a lot of people end up building said unit. And I gotta say, for what it was worth, this year we did get a lot of solid 4-star refines. For this reason, I've decided to make a video on what I believe are the top 10 4-star refines of this year. For reference, we only got about 14 to 15 4-star refines. That's including all the Grails. So we don't necessarily have that many to go through. That being said, there are a lot of good 4-star refines that we did get this year, and I do want to highlight each and every one of them. So if this seems like an interesting topic to you that you want to stick around to and listen to, feel free to let me know in the comments or give me a like and subscribe and then so on and so forth. But without out of the way, let's just get started. Starting us off at number 10, we have Soleil, who got a Fire Sweep PRF that grants attack speed plus 5 and unconditional accelerated cooldown per unit's attack. On the surface, this may seem really basic, and to be fair, it kind of is, but given the fact that she does have unconditional accelerated cooldown and she's infantry, she essentially doesn't have to run any sort of heavy blade or flashing blade, which is really solid for making Gale Force checks, and she could just continue to stack up her attack and speed. There is concern, absolutely, for one-shots, because if you just end up stacking up her attack way too much, chances are that she's just going to be doing way too much damage. However, as a Gale Force unit, having the ability to just attack your foes while they can't counterattack is really solid in general. And the fact that she is infantry does mean she can run a 4 cooldown Gale Force with Times Pulse. And given the fact that her base weapon is just Fire Sweep, she doesn't necessarily have to run damage reduction skills because of the fact that foes just simply cannot counterattack. However, she will want to run a standard like no follow-up or even hit and run or Wings of Mercy depending on the composition you use for your team. But for what it's worth, it's definitely the most basic refine that we got this year, but it does the job fairly well for Gale Force, and that's why I believe Soleil is definitely number 10 on this list. And then going to number 9, we have Linus with Fanged Basilicos, which is essentially a slaying axe that grants attack speed plus 5 and it inflicts penalties to speed and defense based on the amount of visible buffs the foe has to speed and defense, with a base effect of speed defense minus 5 on the foe. It's also fairly simple when you break it down, but considering the fact that he essentially gets plus 10 attack and speed from his weapon, at minimum, and then having Slaying means he can also function as a really solid Gale Force unit. I would say in a similar sense to Soleil, he does have good offenses, but given that he's inflicting a lot of penalties to defense and gaining a lot of attack as a result, there's a good chance that he can also one-shot his foes if he's not careful. That being said, he does have Slaying in his weapon, so you could always opt for Heavy Blade or Flashing Blade forward. So he starts out with a Gale Force at 2 cooldown, which isn't bad by any means. Personally, you could also go down the Flashing Blade route because it's probably going to be easier for you to stack up speed than it is to stack up attack because foes are just getting stronger and stronger. However, I would definitely say, for what it's worth, I would definitely say Linus did get a really solid refine when it comes to just Gale Forcing. His damage output's going to be really high. He does get a lot of extra speed from his weapon, and he does have a defense set, so even if he has to take a hit from a melee foe, chances are he's going to survive a hit. And for that reason, I also have him at number 9. Going to number 8, I have Marissa, who's also a really solid Gale Force unit because of the fact that she has accelerated cooldown and Times Pulse in her weapon, meaning she can actually act as a pseudo-Navarre, where she can get a 1 cooldown Gale Force and additional offenses. However, one of the concerns you might be thinking is that because she does get true damage from her weapon, if her special triggers, it will just go to waste if she uses Gale Force, which is a fair point. However, I would definitely argue you could go one way or the other with her build, whether that's Gale Force or instant Luna special triggers. And the fact that she does have Times Pulse in her weapon means she can definitely stack it with Times Pulse in her C slot, meaning she can have a instant 3 cooldown special, which is really strong. And because she does get additional offenses from her weapon, you could also stack up true damage with Flashing Blade 4 if you really wanted to. However, I would definitely say if you are going with the instant special, you don't really need to worry about running Flashing Blade. Instead, you could stack it up with more offenses like Life and Death, or even just run Distant Counter, so if the foe initiates combat on her, then she can survive a hit and then retaliate with an instant special. And the reason I do have her at number 8 is that while her refine is fairly tame, I would definitely argue it's better than Soleil's and Linus's because of the fact that it is just a pseudo Scarlet Sword, which I would argue is just better for instant Gale Forcing. However, because it also has true damage on her hit and she has Slaying and Time Pulse in her weapon, she can actually spam 3 cooldown specials or 4 cooldown specials in the enemy phase and end up dealing a lot of damage to the foe. Next we have Morgan at number 7, who basically got an Omni Menace except without the defense penalty, which is perfectly fine because it covers his most important stats, being his attack speed and res, and then he gets plug-in on his refine if his HP is above 25% or more, which is actually really solid for an Aether Raid's offense carry, on light season especially, because you could stack up his defensive stats really well, and he gets a lot of attack from his weapon. I would definitely say it's one of the better 4-star refines that we got this year because of the fact that plug-in is just an insane effect. However, there are concerns with how it can get cancelled out, whether that's with unities or that's with Slick Fighter and Far Save units. There is also the concern of area of effect specials that can knock him out of the 25% range because his visible defenses are not high whatsoever. However, when it just comes to overall damage output, the fact of the matter is that he's going to be doing a lot of damage because he does get a lot of speed from his weapon. And then the additional penalties he inflicts on the foe means he can output more damage because he gets additional attack. And if he needs to take a hit from a ranged foe, chances are he's going to be doing that fairly well if they are penalized. I also forgot to mention this, but because of the fact that it only targets one foe, chances are that if a foe is able to reach Morgan from the backlines, whether that's with a ranged cab or someone who gets refreshed by, let's say, a legendary Azura or anyone that can grant additional movement, for example, or even just a regular dancer. If they're able to reach Morgan at that point, then chances are Morgan is not going to be doing a lot of damage whatsoever because it just becomes a weapon that inflicts -4 to every stat, and that's about it. But I would definitely say Morgan's best performance comes from light season because he can run support such as Tamari Air and then inflict a bunch of penalties on the foe, thus making Morgan a really big threat to a lot of foes. And for those reasons, I would definitely say Morgan has earned his spot at number 7 for the 4-star refines that we got this year. Next at number 6, we have Finn, who got a dual phase Brave weapon that grants additional speed but inflicts defense res -4. And if his HP is above 25% or more, it inflicts an additional -4 attack, speed, and defense on the foe, and neutralizes bonuses to the foe's attack and defense, meaning that he can output more damage. However, one of the problems I personally have with Finn is that his base attack, while not necessarily the worst, is not great with the weapon that he has because it's essentially a 10 to 14 might weapon. And considering the fact that foes are just getting bulkier and bulkier by the day, I have a strong feeling that Finn is not going to age fairly well, just because of the fact that his attack set is not the highest with his PRF. However, that doesn't mean Finn is bad by any means. I would definitely say being a cav does have its benefits for a Gale Force hit and run strat with Kanto. However, I would definitely say that if Finn is unable to take out his foes within the first 2 hits, I would definitely say there's a good possibility that Finn will not be able to survive a counterattack because of the penalty he gets from his weapon. And there is also that argument that it does get neutralized because of the -4 attack that's inflicted on the foe. But considering the fact that his resistance is also really low, on top of the fact that he doesn't really have the best defense as opposed to someone like Lex, I would definitely say there's an argument to be made as to whether or not having the ability to quad with low attack is worth the trade-off of having less bulk to work with, especially if the foe can counterattack. Even so, Finn is not bad by any means, but I do think he does get a pass because of the fact that there aren't that many easily mergeable Lance Cavalry units that we have in the 3-star and 4-star pool that can compete with Finn. That being said, I do think Finn isn't bad by any means. I just think that while his weapon is really good, could definitely benefit from a different unit because his attack stat and his defenses are not necessarily the best. Even so, I believe Finn has earned his spot at number 6. Next at number 5, we have Walhert, who got a surprisingly decent refine. What this weapon essentially does is grant a bunch of visible stats, meaning he doesn't have to run ally support, whether that's tactics or rallies or whatever, it's self-sufficient. And then he does have conditional +4 to everything during combat if he initiates combat or isn't adjacent to an ally, which is fairly easy to meet. So in some sense, he's essentially getting +10 to everything. However, it's not necessarily that black and white because of the fact that you can pretty much put visible buffs on any unit with no issue whatsoever. But having it be self-sufficient is really nice nonetheless. And then for his refine, he inflicts minus attack and defense 7 on foes within 4 spaces, and flash, which essentially prevents foes from counterattacking. And this works on multiple foes, not just one foe, so long as it's within the proximity effect, which is really, really nice because he can safely initiate on a foe if they are within that range. And then he inflicts an additional minus attack and defense 5 on the foe if the foe's HP is 75% or more, which essentially allows him to do a lot of one-shots, which is really, really strong. I would definitely argue that while this refine does have a lot of potential, it can definitely get muddied by unities, it can get muddied by near saves, it can get muddied by a lot of stuff if he's a frontliner, which is definitely going to be his biggest role because he is just a bulky axe cav. I would definitely say that it does have the potential to do a lot of things. However, because of the fact that it is easy to bait out cavs, you can simply run a near save unit and then have the ability to counterattack wall heart, which shouldn't be that hard to do considering the fact that near saves and far saves are just so prevalent these days. I would argue that this is better for general purpose, or even in the new Summoner Duels mode. I would definitely say it has a lot of ability to shine there. However, for an Aether Raid's defense or even offense unit, I would definitely say it doesn't have as much going for it as opposed to any other place. So while I do think it is a good refine, I don't necessarily think it's as good as it's being made out to be, personally. Maybe I'm missing something in this, but personally, I don't see the hype. But let me know what you think down below, because I'm curious. Maybe I'm just missing something. But in any case, I do think he has earned his spot at number 5. And then at number 4, we have the Black Knight / Zelgius. I know Zelgius is a 5-star, so it's kind of weird, but I'm going to count Zelgius in this category because they share the same weapon and they're basically the same unit, minus a couple things. But for the most part, they're pretty much the same. This is also a really, really basic refine, just having distant counter with Slaying and Spectrum 4. But the reason he's up here at number 4 is because of the fact that he's in armor with Black Luna, meaning he can always retaliate with a Black Luna on the first hit. And because he is in armor with really solid stats, he can access stuff like Steady Breath, Special Fighter, Slick Fighter, Crafty. He can stack up his stats really, really well because he does get a bunch of stats from his weapon, and then you can just use him as a near save unit and take out a lot of foes with Black Lunas. It's really, really simple, all things considered, but it does the job so well that I absolutely believe he's earned this spot at number 4. I would definitely say the distant counter effect is nowhere near as good as it used to be because of the fact that now we're in a meta where foes don't necessarily need to be Omni tanks. However, because of the fact that he does have a Slaying Edge that grants Spectrum 4 and Black Luna with Near Save and Steady Breath, he has absolutely earned this spot at number 4. And then we get to our top 3s, starting with Kaze at number 3. Kaze essentially got a Slaying Dagger that grants +8 to his attack, speed, and res during combat, and if his speed is greater than the foe speed, he gets Flashing Blade 4, which is really, really solid. I would definitely say that Kaze is the best dagger demote that we have in the game right now because of the fact that he has Flashing Blade 4 in his weapon, meaning he can bypass guard effects. If he were to use a Blazing Wind set, for example, it would start at a 3 cooldown, and if the foe had some sort of guard, all he would have to do is make a speed check, which should be easy considering the fact that his base speed is really, really high, and he gets +8 to his speed from his weapon, meaning Flashing Blade checks aren't going to be hard by any means, which then should allow him to charge up his Blazing Wind again with Special Spiral. Kaze is also definitely one of the best lethality users in the game for similar reasons, having access to a Slaying Dagger, on top of the fact that he has low HP, meaning it's easy to pulse him. And then the Flashing Blade is just more cream on the crop because of the fact that he is able to just bypass guard effects, meaning that he's essentially a mini colorless Volk in a sense. While he doesn't get the guaranteed 2 cooldown per hit, he will guarantee get 1. And the Slaying effect just makes it easier to trigger since he can reset it to 1 cooldown with Special Spiral. Or even worst case scenario, he can run Null Follow-Up and then run Sturdy Impact if you want to stack up his bulk even more, because he will guarantee trigger it on the second hit, provided that there isn't any guard present. But I would definitely say Kaze has gotten the third best 4-star refine of this year, without a doubt, because I believe it is just that stacked. I do believe it has so much potential, and I would definitely say Kaze has earned a spot at number 3. Next we have Julius at number 2, who's essentially a ranged dragon with Dragon Wall, which can inflict -11 attack and resistance to the foe, on top of having Sabotage Attack Res, meaning he's not only self-sufficient, but he's also able to stack up his Dragon Wall effect really easily because he's inflicting so many penalties to the foe's attack and resistance. That, on top of the fact that he just has really solid resistance to begin with and workable speed, he can honestly become a really solid ranged tank, even going up against foes such as Legendary Leaf because he has damage reduction in his weapon. He will have to watch out for stuff like Young Innis, who can get instant specials and pierce through his Dragon Wall. But outside of that one counter, Julius is definitely one of the best ranged tanks we have in the game right now because of the fact that he has so much resistance, he has damage reduction, he can run null counter. The only thing he's really missing is a guaranteed follow-up attack like Micaiah has, but outside of that, Julius definitely got one of the best 4-star refines this year by far. I would definitely say it's fairly apparent, considering the fact that they just slapped so much stuff on his weapon. And while he does have a dragon effectiveness weakness, on top of the fact that his condition will not work if the foe does have a dragon effective weapon, the fact of the matter is that dragon effectiveness is very rare these days because of the fact that nobody really runs that many dragons, unless you're in arena, of course. But Julius doesn't really score that well in arena, so you really wouldn't be using him there all too often. Or if you were to use him in arena assault, you could always just pick and choose when he goes out on the field, so it's not really that big of an issue. But even so, I would definitely say Julius is one of the best red tome demotes we have in the game. And if you had to build a red tome, he's definitely the go-to unit, I would argue. And then at number 1, I believe Arden got the best 4-star refine this year. Now, there's a lot of arguments to be made about whether or not Arden deserves this spot because of the fact that it's not only his weapon that allows him to perform as well as he does, but it's near saves and steady breath seal that allows him to perform as well as he does. I would definitely argue that if we didn't consider any skill inheritance or skills in general, just the weapon, that the list would be all over the place, which is why I do believe Arden has earned this spot at number 1. I would definitely say having access to a bunch of skills does play a role in whether or not a refine is able to be effective as it is. Because when Arden's refine initially came out, it wasn't that good because of the fact that he didn't have any meaningful way to take advantage of it. He did have a lot of HP, in a decent amount of attack and really good defense. But the fact of the matter is that before far saves and near saves were entered into the game, Arden had to be used as an Omni tank, which was pretty much impossible because of his low resistance. However, because of the addition of near saves, he's able to min-max his matchups, meaning he's pretty much able to win every single melee matchup out there, minus a few exceptions. On top of the fact that he can always trigger Ignis on the second hit, provided that there isn't any guard effects present. But even so, I would definitely say that Arden definitely got the best 4-star refine this year because of the fact that Dual Phase Brave is not only arguably the strongest effect in the game right now, but the fact that he's just so min-maxed on top of having access to near saves and the steady breath seal and follow-up ring, Arden is definitely the premier demote near save unit you can get access to. And because his performance is so incredibly good, thanks to near saves and his weapon and steady breath, and I'm going on about this over and over again, but it's very important to emphasize that it's not only the refine that allows him to perform as well as he does, but it's the skills that he has access to. And for all these reasons, I would definitely say Arden got the best 4-star refine this year. But let me know what you think down below. This is my top 10 4-star refines of 2021. Is there anything you agree with or disagree with? Let me know down below. Do you think there's arguments to be made about whether or not some units I didn't include should be on the list? I would love to know your thoughts. I'll be working on the 5-star version sometime this week. However, I do think that list is going to be harder because there are a lot of really good 5-star refines. And there were just a lot more 5-star refines in general. But even so, this has been my top 10 4-star refines of 2021 list. Thank you for watching. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you next time.